Hello. Hamlet famously asks actors to hold a mirror up to nature. But what happens when an artist holds a mirror in the form of an illustration up to Shakespeare's texts and characters? To discuss this with me today, I'm happy to introduce Jean-Louis Claret, Associate Professor at the University of Aix-Marseille, specialist of Shakespeare and an illustrator himself. His book, Picturing Shakespeare, was published this year with Anthem Press. And Michael Goodman, an independent researcher who received his PhD in English literature from Cardiff University in 2017. His thesis was titled Illustrating Shakespeare, Practice, Theory, and the Digital Humanities. Michael is the creator of the Victorian Illustrated Shakespeare Archive, an open-access online resource that contains over 3,000 illustrations of Shakespeare from the Victorian period. Michael, maybe we can start with you if you'd like to say a few words to present your project, the website.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me, Maxime, and lovely to meet you as well, Jean-Louis. I've ordered your book for Christmas, by the way, after doing some research. It looks fantastic. I'm really excited to explore that a lot more as well. So I'm Michael John Goodman. My PhD was on illustrating Shakespeare, basically, and part of that process involved exploring what would happen if we took historical illustration and put them within a modern context and in a modern open access context, like an online digital archive. At the time, I was very scared because no one had done this sort of thing as a PhD to this extent before. It's usually a sort of postdoc project or a professorial project. So I was fumbling around in the dark, really. The Victorian Illustrated Shakespeare Archive, available at shakespeareillustration.org, contains over 3,000 illustrations from the Victorian period, from about 1836 all the way up to 1875. The core of the archive is what is widely known as the four major illustrated editions. They're the illustrated editions that were published by Charles Knight, the ones that were illustrated by Kenny Meadows, H.E. Sellos, and John Gilbert. And between them, all four of them, they each tackle envisioning the plays in very different, distinct ways that I hope we'll be able to talk about later on, perhaps.
Sure, yeah, we can have a quick look at the website. We'll have more detail, obviously. So this is it. So you've got different editions there on top. Then it's classify and cover these histories, tragedies, etc. for each of them. Scrolling down.
I also got you can
find things by keyword.
You can explore it via
Anything you'd like me to show?
Sorry, Maxine.
Anything you'd like me to show now as an example?
Well, just to give people an idea, if you just go to Kenny Meadows, Maxine, please, at the top. Go tragedies. Go Macbeth. And if you go this way, this will come up with the thumbnails of the illustrations. And if you click on the second illustration in Maxime, up, if you go up with the snake, the title page, and then you can scroll through all of them. You can enlarge the picture. You get a sense of it. You all know how the internet works. And the idea of it was, unlike so many academic resources at the time, I didn't want to overload it with text and context. I just wanted to allow the users to be able to go to the website and explore it for themselves with as little kind of direction from myself as possible. It places the images on the site without any sort of wider contextual information. It does, you can get the dates and everything else, but I really just wanted to foreground the image in a way that they might not necessarily have been before. So
Although you do give indications of the date, but also the names of the engravers.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. What I should say is there's not huge essays on each of the illustrators. It's very this is a visual archive, and it's going to look visual.
Right. Okay. So we'll have the explore it further in a few moments.
Yeah, yeah.
Jean-Louis, your own book is different in kind, obviously.
Yeah, I guess we cannot say this is conventional illustration of Shakespeare. It's, I guess, something a bit special, and it's motivated by a desire to share two sorts of approaches to the plays. Something that is more academic. My research as a Shakespeare professor at the university, which is kind of conventional, but also something that has to do with the visual knowledge, if this makes sense, visual knowledge, which is provided by the plays, because there's something that there's something lingering in the plays that I think is difficult to grasp with words, but that is possible maybe to render with colors and gazes and etc. So I wanted to account for a private, maybe personal response to the text and to the poetry.
Yeah, that's very interesting. A lot of things there already, including, of course, the notion that your own pictures, you present them as commentary on the text, together with the analysis in words that you make in the book. So they're a form of knowledge, of criticism, the pictures.
Well, I think so, because, after studying Shakespeare for such a long time, because I'm a very old man now, I got to, sorry, I guess I got to understand a few things about a few mechanisms about the way the plays were conceived and how they operate, etc. But also at the same time, something developed in me that has to do with the aesthetic dimension of the plays, and something that transpired through the play that I could not exactly render with words, so I needed some other mediation for them, and I used images, especially colors and gazes and positions of hands, etc. But I think this is a form of knowledge. I think so.
You use the word lingering.
Yeah.
And it's in your book. You say that I'm quoting you: images do not duplicate texts.
Yeah. Mm.
They express something lingering deep in the dramatic text that they alone are able to reveal.
Yeah.
I was very interested in this notion that the illustration is a form of revelation, as if there's something veiled or hidden in the text that the picture unveils.
It is at the same time hidden and revealed, and this is the magic of poetry. Maybe I could develop the point. It won't be very long, but I think that one of the mechanisms of poetry, this is explained by Eri De Luca, for example, is to miss the target. That's the function of poetry. If you want to speak about death and your fear of death, you're not going to say, "I'm afraid I might die." You say, "Must our mouths be cold?" And you don't speak about death, but you get the listeners to understand that you're talking about death. So this is what Eri De Luca calls graciously missing the target. So you don't say the things, but you get them through with language. Language at the same time hides, conceals, and reveals. So that thing which is hidden in poetry, I think, can be revealed by the image. Edward Hopper said, if something can be said, there's no reason to paint it. So that poetic inspiration is in the text, hidden by the text, revealed by the text, and it can also be, I guess, revealed by or expressed by images, illustrations.
Michael, is this something you observed in the illustrations you collected and digitized? Do they serve the same function?
Well, this is fantastic, because I think there's going to be such a rich conversation, because actually what my illustrators they've got a commercial imperative. So they've been hired by a publisher to produce hundreds, if not thousands, on occasion, of these illustrations on a monthly basis, turning them out to, trying to reach as big an audience as possible. And part of their function at the time, and I would love if I could get a time machine and go back and interview these illustrators, like how we can have a discussion with Jean-Louis now. I'd be so excited because you're working with them daily, and you feel like you get to know them through their own style and their own quirks, but you're always going to be end up putting words into their mouths. But they've got the commercial imperatives. They're trying to reach a mass audience, and in the Victorian period, the technology to create hundreds of illustrations like this, to mass produce these volumes or serials, due to the new railways, new printing techniques. It suddenly became this big mass industry in a way it wasn't before. And all these publishers suddenly start coming up. They suddenly start thinking, oh, we can make a profit here. And there's so many. What I found, especially doing the Charles Dickens stuff, for example, is how much that intersects with the Shakespeare stuff, because all these illustrators, they're all part of the same ecosystem. And the Shakespeare work is interesting because then they're working with a dead author, and I'm not sure if Jean-Louis has felt this working with Shakespeare, but like this responsibility to the dead artist, that what do you owe him? As say Charles Dickens is working contemporaneously with his illustrator, and he's having back and forth saying, no, redraw it. Whereas these guys, they're thinking, well, what can I get away with here? Certainly when you come with someone like Kenny Meadows, who is a quirky illustrator, and you can see him wanting to push the rules constantly as far as he could, but he's obviously restrained by what was acceptable by Victorian standards. So, yeah.
We can't hear you, Maxime. Your microphone is off.
Yeah. You're on mute, Maxime.
Sorry. Going on. Yeah, I was saying we can have a look at a few of the Kenny Meadows illustrations.
Yes.
We just mentioned him.
Yeah, great.
Can you see the screen now?
If you go to if you go to Taming of the Shrew, Maxime, that's quite an interesting one.
Okay. There it is.
There he is. So what's interesting here? Taming of the Shrew is obviously like it's a play about gender dynamics. It's about sex. It's about how we treat women, how women treat men. But what Kenny Meadows cleverly does is, because you can't actually at the time visualize some of this sexual tension, he turns the characters into a cat and a dog. So throughout, he's using these symbols to represent where they're at, where the relationship is at emotionally. And if you scroll through to the end, Maxime, so at the end of the play, Taming of the Shrew, Petruchio and Caterina get obviously become a couple, and there's this final illustration here. It's cat and a dog with their clothes on top of the table, and they've obviously gone to bed with each other, but he obviously can't illustrate that, and he has to work out another way of doing it. I just find this sort of thing that Kenny Meadows does constantly in various aspects really, really clever and intriguing and funny as well, because it's a good joke.
But personally, if I may, I think this is particularly interesting because we find something that is akin to what I said a moment ago, that poetry does not say the thing. You beat about the bush, you beat about the thing, and the image is doing the same thing here. You understand what is meant, though you don't show it. And I think this is fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it exceeds the text in its own powerful way. Yeah, for sure.
It complements the text, shedding light on some dark areas, because illustrare is to shed light on. So
Shed light.
sort of exchange of light.
Yeah.
This is, I suppose,
Jean-Louis, that's brilliant. I get exchange of light is terrific. I'm going to write that down.
there's also very literal light in the pictures because of the colors and the techniques used that are obviously very different from one illustrator to another. On in the archive, you can see etchings on wood, etchings on steel, photogravures, lithographies, chromolithographies, etc., photographs even, and the effects created are very, very different. So, is it something you, I don't know, you'd like to say a few words on, and maybe Jean-Louis as well about your
So as I said in the introduction, the project has started off with the four wood engraved illustrated editions, which you'll find at the top of the archive. But during lockdown, because I've since getting the PhD, I was always reluctant to go back to this project and develop it, because I was like, well, that's set in stone now. That's, you know, let's leave that be and move on, and we'll do something else. And it was just during lockdown, because over the years I've accumulated quite a few illustrated editions from the period, and I was like, I want something to do that's relatively straightforward. And I had the chromolithography one, which was published by John Murdoch. And I thought, well, why don't I put that up? Let's see people respond to this. And, you know, because again, it's an academic project, but I feel like I'm pushing these kind of barriers in a way where we can add to it and we can consolidate it and we can build on it. And just because, you know, I got my PhD from it doesn't mean that's the end of that project now. It means we can completely rethink what a digital project can be within academia. So I started thanks, Maxime. So I had this edition, which I thought was glorious. No one knows who the illustrator is because it's shrouded in mystery, which I love again. But I think the art style's so distinct. It's so different from everything else in the archive as well, that it was just like, well, let's really enrich this archive by having these different editions up. They might not be as comprehensive as the original four, but they do add to it and give us different angles to think about illustration and the Victorian period. So if I was talking to my students about this, I would talk about chromolithography, for example, and how illustration and illustration techniques are often determined by the technology available at the time, which then leads me to talk about the archive in a broader sense about how I can do this because of the internet and publicly available tools. So yeah, I think there's only 18 illustrations there, but I think they're so rich, and I think in interaction with the other images in the archive, they really it makes it very valuable and rewarding, I think. What do you think, Maxime?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. As you said, they're really different from all the other illustrations, which are all black and white illustrations. That was
so that came.
Yeah.
Well, that was the starting point in
color in his book.
Yeah. Well, it's something like being in the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Where they change the color and you're like, oh wow, this is a whole new dimension all of a sudden. So yeah, it was, and then that just gave me the impetus then to be like, well, if I can do that with that one, why not just put up everything else I've got? So in the past 2 years, really, we've got a real solid, comprehensive look of how the Victorians visualize Shakespeare in book form.
So, Jean-Louis, your pictures are not lithographs or etchings? What are they technically? We can't hear you.
Sorry, it's only colored pencils. I'm using colored pencils all the time.
Wow.
And just a few exceptions when I place a little white dot on the eyes of my characters because I want this little dot to be shiny and flashy. Otherwise, it's only colored pencils from the beginning to the end. And when I'm doing some, for example, King Lear, the black and white one, I'm using only one pencil, which is a white pencil, and depends on the pressure I use on the pencil. So it's always the same technique, and it's one of my tragedies. Is the fact that I always paint or I always draw in the same style, and I wish I could escape from my style and draw differently, but there's no way. I tell my hand to do something different, but it resists. So I mean, this is kind of amusing because there seems to be some sort of style which is not exactly my style, because I imagine other images before I start drawing, and when the drawing is done, it's always about the same thing. It's always, in other words, a self-portrait, and this is a bit terrifying. So I try to extirpate myself from myself, but it's like Hamlet, but no way, no way. There's only one of my drawings which is different, which I think is a different style. Maybe I succeeded in taking a step outside of myself. Is my Iago, which is kind of blurred, and it's the one and only blurred character I've made. Otherwise, it's tragically clear and with very neat outlines.
That's brilliant.
There's
And
one of the
Jean-Louis, I just love the idea of Iago being blurred.
Oh yeah, I
It's
love the
yeah,
idea.
very clever. Yeah, very clever. Yeah.
But I made a huge effort. And it's maybe one of the few drawings I made that I like, because my impression is that someone else made it, not me.
yeah,
Right.
there it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
It'll be very clear. Is it
Yeah,
this one?
that's it. It's the
I
Yaga.
didn't take a picture
Oh,
of it this
that's
weekend, but
superb.
I wanted
looks
it to
like
be like
Oh,
a
how
tree
wonderful.
trunk, stuck in the earth,
Yeah. Solid. Yeah.
passive and unchanging and following its path. And I mean, this was represented by the
Yeah.
tree. That was some sort of a visual knowledge of Yago and the break.
talking of the
Great.
talking of the creation and the origin of the pictures. One of the fascinating moments in your book is when you explain how the picture was made, and you give its um, the portrait of Richard II,
Oh, yes.
and you of course show the full portrait
Yeah.
uh, on the next page, but you also show a picture of you. I can show it maybe. The portrait in the making,
Yeah.
with your hand appearing.
And to be honest, I prefer the
There it is.
unfinished one. I prefer this one to the finished one. Because my impression is that the character is still partly in the color, because he's emerging from the color, and this is what I
Yes.
wanted to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was kind of disappointed by the result, but I shouldn't say it. I prefer this one, which is a sort of cross-section, a sort of intermediary position between making and being made. I love this, and
Yeah.
of course it's a birth, it's a delivery. I act as a
Yeah.
sort of a mother by proxy. I'm pregnant when I draw, and I love that. Especially when you put a little dot in the eye, suddenly the gaze appears, and this is amazing. I love this because you draw one eye, then you draw the other eye, so you draw two things. Sorry for my voice. You draw two things, but when you put the little dots, you've got three things. You've got two eyes and a gaze, and you don't know where the gaze comes from, and it's always something of a surprise. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was
Um,
I was it's such a weird time to be having this conversation, because I was just talking to some friends yesterday. We're having a coffee, and we were talking about oh, it's a new documentary on, I think, Disney Plus or something, about something like that. And I said, you know, what really excites me about my work and other people's work is process and listening to people discuss their ideas behind how things were made. And I find it so electrifying and interesting and fascinating, sometimes much more so than the finished image, the finished film, the finished piece of music, the outtakes, the process of going through the iterations. I just find it fascinating, and I always have done. So Jean-Louis, that's yeah, it's great, really great.
And in addition, it's exciting and enjoyable. It's just pleasure.
Yeah.
In addition.
The
For sure.
colors are very striking in your illustrations, and there's always one dominant color in each of them. And there's an very interesting passage as well, in which you comment on this. And you also write about colors in Shakespeare's text, and how so many different words about colors, hues are used. And you have this fascinating sentence: the colors I use in my drawings can be viewed as the visual rendering of mental phenomena. So does that mean that dominant color will express a particular mood in the characters, or is supposed to create a particular mood in the viewer?
Well, I guess so. I think so, but because colors in literature do not exist. I think it's Régis Debray who speaks about the blind colors of a text, because the colors are not visible when you read a text. And a dog, which is mentioned in a text, does not bark, he says too. So colors are something different. And even sometimes when they are mentioned, when you illustrate the scene, you may choose a different color, because the vision, not the colors of course, but the vision of colors changes. Some time ago, I made a series of illustrations for Twelfth Night, which is on the agenda of aggregation, and I represented Malvolio, and I did not dress him with yellow stockings, because I think yellow does not have the same color, the same negative connotations anymore. So I gave him a different color. So there's still yellow in his clothes. He has a sort of skirt, yellow skirt, but he has a pink stocking, pink stockings with the circles in them that make him look ridiculous. So colors are, of course, the visual colors we think about. Yellow is yellow, but it's also something that carries negative connotations. So we may transpose this. So it's, and if I speak about lemon, you're thinking about the color, though I did not mention the color. So I mean, all this is ingrained in poetry, in the text. So you've got the colors mentioned, and the metaphorical colors, because colors are a sort of language in itself.
There's talking of colors and also composition and the layout of the pictures. You've chosen to make portraits almost exclusively, which is also a sort of departure from other illustrations, like the ones we can see in the illustration archive, which most of them are scenes. Most of them.
This is one of the reasons why I'm not sure I am an illustrator. I don't know. I hope I am. I wish I were, but I'm not sure, because the first thing I'm doing is enjoying myself, trying to express and share things. But I'm not really interested in representing scenes, though I do it sometimes. What I like to do is to create and show I know it's a dream, a personal connection with, for example, Ophelia. I dream of meeting the gaze of Ophelia. And by the way, you may have noticed that some of my portraits are facing us, so we can share meet their gaze. Not always, sometimes they are looking away. something over our shoulders, and some are profiles like King Lear. And this has to do with Alberti, which is who is at the back of it, and is De Pictura, and Pliny the Elder, because Pliny the Elder tells the story of the first image ever, which is the story of a young woman whose boyfriend came to her place in Greece, ancient Greece, and said, "I'm going to go away forever." So she said, "Okay, sit there." She placed a candle and she drew the outline of his face in profile. So the face in profile is the promise of departure, is imminent absence. So King Lear cannot be reached. This is why I drew him in profile. He's away from us. And the other one, the character facing us in a portrait, is someone with whom you can share a gaze. You can meet the character's gaze. And this is the first image, not according to Pliny the Elder, but according to Alberti. And he said the first image was Narcissus looking at his reflection in a river. So you have two conceptions of the first image, and Alberti said, "What is it to paint? It's just to embrace the surface of a river." So you can meet the gaze of some of my characters. You can talk silently by looking into the eyes of Ophelia or Imogen, etc. And you're kept at a certain distance from King Lear, because he's already away into madness, etc.
Yeah.
So there's a symbolical dimension of those sorts of portraits.
Definitely. I think, Jean-Louis, what you do as well is you profoundly create this interpretive space for us to have this discussion about what is an illustrator, but also what you do is you actually do take us back to to Shakespeare's text, where we can like look at your images and say, well, does this change now how we understand Ophelia, for example, or Lear? You know, what are the implications of what you are doing for us, looking at your work, who then have to go back and read Shakespeare and see these characters in a whole new light? It's really good.
Well, what I had in mind was a sort of, as you said, exchange between the poetry of the text
Yeah.
in particular and the poetry of the image, and create some sort of tension in a positive way, tension between the two.
Yeah.
The image communicating with the poetry, and the poetry is shedding light, as we said a moment ago, exchange of light, enlightenment between words and images. Well, this is what I'm trying to do.
Definitely.
It's very striking.
So exciting.
In most Victorian illustrations, at least those from the first part of the century, but correct me if I'm wrong, most of the illustrations show the characters almost on a stage, like the illustrations reproduce the visual aspect of the theater. And maybe I can show an example of that. I think that the John Dix edition is a very good example of that. If I share the screen again and we have a look at them. So here they are. Oops, no, not this one. There, like this one, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just give you some context about the John Dix edition. It's not systematically illustrated like several of the others in the archive. You just get this sort of headpiece for each play. But this edition sold over 700,000 copies, and it was the most popular illustrated edition in the Victorian period because of how cheap it was. So this edition is what most people in the period, this would have been their first kind of interaction with Shakespeare and these illustrations as well. But exactly like you say, Maxime, it's very theatrical. We're always I've been fascinated about this since the moment I started the project, really. If we're thinking like a cinema director, with these illustrations, we're always at the same distance away from the characters. You know, they're always shown in mid shot, as if we're static watching them on stage or watching them on TV. we never have close-ups. We're always, you know, and it's a bit later on, H.E. Sellis does this all the time. Even though the size of the images changes, they're always within a frame, as if it's a proscenium arch or a screen, but we're always the same distance away from the characters all the time, as if we're seated statically. Which I find fascinating, and it might be something I might explore it further later on this year, because yeah, it's one of those projects that's been on my mind for a long time, and I'm working on this now the past week and thinking through things. I'm like, well, I think there's something in that could be quite interesting. So, but for a lot of these illustrators, I do think they're thinking like either stage directors or cinema directors,
Yeah.
where, you know, where do we place these characters? What is the composition here? How can we show visually what the drama is? What are they trying to achieve? How best can we frame it? Will it be in a close-up of Lear, for example, or will it be a shot from further away to set the scene, a master shot, if you like, or shall we show Cordelia and Lear close-up? So these questions that these illustrators would have been asking are exactly the same as what a cinema director would have been asking in the 20th century, I feel. And again, I would love to have that discussion with them, but we never can. But I do find it fascinating. And I say each illustrator and how they illustrate the plays in the archive, it's so distinct. It's so unique. They obviously have their own approach to Shakespeare and illustrating, which is, yeah, it's wonderful. And it's wonderful to think about as well.
There were a few portraits, though, especially in the photographs. Again, if I share the screen and we can have a look at some of them, I think it's we go down here. Photographs, yes, here they are. There.
Yeah. So what's interesting about this edition? This is the John Tallis edition. It's obviously it has these are famous actors and actresses of the period, both American and British. But the backgrounds are illustrated and their costumes are illustrated. So the only thing that's a photograph is their face and hands. So it's this weird technique of technology. That's why it kind of looks a bit uncanny and weird.
Oh, right. Yes.
Does that make sense? So the only real thing you're seeing is the face, which again is really interesting from an illustrated perspective.
She looks terrifying, Lady Macbeth. I mean,
yes, it absolutely does.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
I don't want to meet her.
Okay.
No.
I don't want to meet her gaze. I don't want to meet her gaze. No way.
No, she's averted it, Jean-Louis. But yeah, it's everything about this set of illustrations is illustrated apart from their faces. This is the John Tallis edition.
It's funny because
this is the.
Go
on, Johnny.
No, I was wondering about the presence of a setting, systematically a setting. Are there any representations of performances in the Elizabethan mode without any setting, just the characters, or is there systematically?
No. So a question I always get asked when I'm talking about this project is, surely the illustrations record certain performances or are valuable to us from theatrical historical perspective, and they're mostly not. They're mostly the illustrators going, well, they might take a stance that's popular from the time that they've seen on stage, but actually they don't replicate stage performances at all. They do their own thing for the medium of print. And that's not to say they're not theatrical, but they're not replicating what's going on the stage at the time.
Well, what is interesting is that I had Lady Macbeth in mind, and this pose when she's holding the letter, I mean, this is constant. We have it so repeatedly in illustrations. So illustrations imitate each other.
Yeah.
Yes. I was going to argue ask you, yeah, if you detected any mutual influence between these illustrators. Do they sometimes work not as much from the text, but from previous
from each other.
pictures from each other? Yes.
Well, I think again, what going back to the Charles Dickens project, what has been so revelatory about that is, like I said at the start of the talk, is all these illustrators are working in the same ecosystem. So Kenny Meadows, well, let's say H.C. Sellos, because he's a bit later, might not have been directly influenced by his Kenny Meadows' portrayal of Lady Macbeth, but H.G. Sellos might have just read Bleak House by Charles Dickens, and in that he might have seen Hablot Knights Brown's illustration of Lady Dedlock, for example, and might think, actually, that's quite an interesting pose what she's doing there with this background. Maybe I could reinterpret that for Macbeth. So all these discussions are going on, but in the there's so much visual material in the Victorian period. I think it's a fool's errand to try and determine influences because we'll never know ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
But it is really fascinating to explore and think about.
Jean-Louis, have you been influenced by other artists?
Oh yes, especially Flemish painters. I mean,
Right, yes.
to me, it's
Yeah.
very important. When I read the plays by Shakespeare, sometimes I have flashes of Bruegel the Elder, or Jan van Eyck. So I made a copy of this. This of course is
The cover of the book, I suppose. Well, you're showing it as well. Yes.
yeah, that's self-portrait, supposed self-portrait by Jan van Eyck. And well, Renaissance paintings, because there are scenes and characters that I associate with characters I see in frescoes. I have in mind Luca Signorelli or Lorenzo Lotto, and the atmosphere in this painting. So Italian Renaissance, and more precisely Flemish paintings. And I've worked on the correspondences, by the way, between Twelfth Night and the Fight of Carnival and Lent by Bruegel, which is one of my latest articles. So, I mean, this is definitely an influence, but maybe it's more than an influence. It's a sort of presence in the texts. That's the way I feel, because if you think of Flemish painting as opposed to Italian painting, you have in Flemish paintings quite a few convex mirrors. And when you have a convex mirror, the space in which the observer is positioned is included in the painting, in the reflection. So there's something universal that includes the spectators in Flemish paintings, which is not often the case in Italian painting. And I think this is something Elizabethan drama and Flemish painting have in common. And I guess this is one of the reasons why I'm tempted to think of Flemish painters, Roger van der Weyden, Robert Campin. I'm a fan. Definitely a fan.
Well, maybe we can have a look at one or two of your illustrations and compare them to Victorian ones. I don't know if you think that would be a relevant thing to do.
Yeah,
but
why not?
For example, the one I showed before, the portrait of King Lear, because you've chosen a scene which has been illustrated very often. Obviously, I suppose,
unsurprisingly,
identified scenes that are more frequently.
Some scenes are more visual.
Yes, and well, this one is. So I'm talking about this portrait, the one you talked about before. It's a profile, and that same scene is illustrated, for example, and it's this one, I believe, Act 3, Scene 2, but obviously very different choices were made there. King Lear is not alone. You see the full of him, not exactly in profile. There's a background which is much more detailed, etc. So
I love I love the darkness of Jean-Louis' background because it's Lear screaming into the void there, which is it's it's dark, it's existential, it's powerful. Whereas Salas's illustration here, it's very much like something you would see on the stage. As I say, it's got the frame around it. It's almost like a tableau. And you don't get you. I mean, you know, he's obviously in pain, but you don't get that visual powerful anger. I think
there's a distance here. There's a distance. We're looking at an image. I mean,
yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
yes.
And if we go through the rest of Salas's illustrations here, you'll see what I mean by he always keeps us at the same distance. We are never zoomed in. We are always in this we're always looking on from the same position, which is interesting because it creates a coherent visual approach to the plays. But it's also must very much have been a choice he made.
Well, my intention,
Maxime, if you go to sorry, Jean-Louis, if you go to John Gilbert's King Lear, there's one that's a bit more, slightly more powerful of a similar scene, but just to give you that one, that's it.
That one, or maybe
there you go. It's a bit more, but it's
this one.
But it's exact. But it's yeah. Compositionally, it's very similar to Salas's, but it's a bit more. There's a bit more power in it, I think.
Because of the background, which is dark as well.
Yeah. And I think there's something like, I don't think it is Stonehenge there in the background, but it's something alluding to paganism, a kind of old stone monument. So it does, that's the one that makes me feels more aligned with Jean-Louis to me. But again, compositionally, it's the same as Salas's, but there's just a bit more anger there that's a bit directly aligns with Jean-Louis' work.
You know, I had a few technical difficulties with this drawing. Well, first, concerning the black background, I definitely wanted a black background because for me it was a night scene, and what I wanted was a split second, the moment when the flash of lightning suddenly brought light to the scene. So just before this scene, you have total darkness, and just after the scene, again you have total blackness. So it's a sort of illusion. I mean, this image does not exist, and the technical problem I had that I mentioned before is that I wanted to place his hand a bit further away from the mouth. Because, you know, when I make a drawing, I pose in front of my mirror. I'm often very ridiculous. I'm quite ridiculous, but I do it, and I want to place the hand there, okay? And I had a problem with the size of the head and the size of the hand and the size of the sheet, because I started with the head and I realized that I couldn't play the hand too far. So I said to myself it would be okay if I thought about some illustrations of the Bible and God with the hand and the sword, the hand that came out of the mouth. So you have a fusion of these elements. But this scene, well, you know, it must be black, it must be dark, because it's not a place. I mean, it's out of time and out of space. So this is what I wanted to render. It's nowhere. It's nowhere. Just not darkness and pain and madness.
Yeah, this void.
Yeah, I want, and I hoped this image would be moving, would touch people, because I think this is something very important. It must be haptic. it must touch people. Then something must happen that has to do with the effect of poetry. And this is why what I try humbly to do, to get the same haptic and emotional impact, similar. Well,
And to show something very different, but there's the portrait of Cordelia here, which of course is completely different because the colors are different. It's still a portrait, but it's not even a full face. And here I think that the butterflies are from a line in the.
Yeah, this is definitely Will Laugh at Gilded Butterflies. I've always been, sorry, I've always been fascinated by this line. I mean, this is pure poetry. Will laugh at gilded butterflies. She's going to meet her father. Well, she is with her father in prison, and they speak about laughing at butterfly. This is what Lear says. And I said this was extraordinary. So I wanted to have a sad expression in her eyes. And to represent the loneliness, I wanted to use blue for one butterfly only, because it was a visual representation of loneliness. So I think this is something you feel. You have a lonely color. You feel when you look at the image. And to me, this scene it had to be gray. I mean, it could not be any other color. That was the color of the mood of this scene. And I think the plays have colors, and within this major color of the play, you have a series of variations on colors. This is a form of synesthesia. And I was amused to see that the Arden edition use colors on the spines of their books. And for example, King Lear is red, Macbeth is black, The Tempest is blue. So I saw that they are sensitive to the colors of the plays.
Yeah, and I think that sensitivity to colour, even if they could, the mid-Victorian Shakespeare illustrators would never have had that response to it. For colour to evoke a psychological mood is something that modernism had to have happened. I don't think they could have quite have got there, if that makes sense.
There's something I don't think we ever speak about in illustration. It's a detail, but I think it's very important. When you're making an illustration, sorry for my voice again. When you're making an illustration, everything changes depending on the music you're listening to. If you draw and listen to, I don't know, AC/DC or to Handel, you will draw differently, and your drawing will be different. And in addition, I think this is particularly interesting because music was part of the performances at the time. Well, I have 12th Night in mind. So the impact of music on illustration, well, for our period, I think is very important. Yeah, it's part of the
which also is perfect for iambic pentameter in the plays, ba-boom, 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 all this. And I haven't touched upon it, which I should have done earlier, really. But the process of going through the illustrations in a printed edition, you do get this sense of rhythm. And you think this is what the publishers are trying to do. They're trying to create a rhythm with, well, we'll put an illustration in here to represent this. Then we'll have a few more pages, and then we'll do another type of illustration. It doesn't necessarily be like this. It could be something different to keep you looking, to keep you engaged. And I just find it fascinating. I find those choices fascinating. And again, each of these editions do it differently, but they're always there. Kenny Meadows is just like, one page you'll have an emblem, the next page you'll have some symbolic snake, for example. The next page you'll have a little headpiece. The next page you'll have a tail pick. There's all these elements that combine for you as a reader to keep turning the page, to keep you engaged, to keep looking, to go out the next month and buy the next edition. But again, it's all rhythm, which I which
Mhm.
I find fascinating in art and work.
This is the illustrations of Twelfth Night by Kenny Meadows. So
Yeah.
to show,
So you got that already. That's different. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I love it when the illustrations do not represent the thing, but suggest the thing, and some do. Yeah, this is great.
This is exactly what Kenny Meadows does, Jean-Louis. I do check it out because it's fascinating stuff.
Mm. Well, because if the
it's all.
Sorry, I was going to say that.
No, I was just going to say it's always different.
If the image is a copy of the text, or I mean, a faithful rendering, there's no real point. There must be something different.
Yeah, it's not telling us anything different or interpretive. It's copying the text and displaying it. And what they will do is they'll tell us something about perhaps their values and ideologies of the time, but they might not necessarily tell us anything profound about the text.
Okay.
One final thought, maybe, because you say that gives a rhythm to the book, and every I don't know how many pages you've got, a new illustration comes up, and there's the idea, you discuss the idea in your book, Jean-Louis, that the picture can be a sort of disruption, maybe for the reader, because you make your own pictures in your mind. It might be very different. Is it something you and the pictures also, even in the character's mind, there's this line that you comment on in Macbeth, if I remember well, when Othello, Desdemona saying that she has a picture in her mind of him, but she uses this strange phrase.
I could see his I could see his image in his mind instead of I could see his image in my mind, which would be logical. But the thing is that he was using words. He used words to seduce her. So what she could see was the lexical image of his mind, that represented his visage. In Othello, in my opinion, you probably remember, I suggested that Othello stands for the world of words, as opposed to Iago, whose name is a game. I mean, it's a play. It's imago. Okay, so you got the world of images. Othello, he seduces Desdemona with this story. He turns his life into a story, as opposed to Iago, who forces people to see the others in a specific way. He wants Cassio to see Desdemona as a prostitute, so he tries to modify the image of the other ones. So I think this is what I had in mind with this idea of getting the text to conjure up an image. This is what Othello does, and this is what he achieves, because Desdemona definitely sees his face, his visage in his words, in his mind, not in her mind. And the other thing, which may be an answer to your question, is that this problem of disruption is not specific to illustration, I think, because sometimes I guess it has happened to you also. Sometimes we go to the playhouse, we attend a performance, and we are so disappointed by the appearance of one of the characters or some characters, and we feel intimately that Desdemona must be fair-haired or dark-haired and slim, and she is not the same color of hair, and she is plump, etc. So there might be a series of disruptions also in performances. That's maybe you want to react to this.
That's so interesting, and what this is just a very airy fairy thought. Is brings to mind. I've never put these two things together before. Roland Barthes' concept of the punctum in a photograph. I just wonder if the illustrations are doing that kind of thing in regards to the text when you're going through. It's that stings, that punctures the text a bit and takes us out of ourselves to to think a bit more deeper and a bit more harder. I don't know. I'm just speaking out loud.
Well, I think it's yeah, certainly something to explore. Yeah, absolutely.
Just one detail, maybe, you know, the representation of Hamlet, for example. If you read the text very precisely, especially at the end in Act 5, we remember that Gertrude said that he is scant of breath and fat. So, of course, there are various interpretations, but the text says that he must be kind of chubby, and he's not an athlete. And yet, whenever we attend a performance of Hamlet, he's a beautiful young man, an athlete, etc. So there might be disruptions from the text, and that are accepted by the public and expected by the public. So sometimes the real disruption is being faithful to the text.
This is your Hamlet.
Yeah, that's yeah, he's a character from
Wow.
Luca Signorelli. Yeah, he's in a fresco by Signorelli. There's something I noticed which I think is amazing. This is definitely food for thought, I think. There's a painting by Vermeer, which is the Procuress. I don't know if you know, maybe you take a look at the Procuress. Later you have a woman dressed in yellow and a man is behind her touching her breast. And a bit next to the man, you have someone who has a strange face, who is supposedly the Procuress, the in-between. And then you have some courtier on the left. This definitely is not an illustration for Twelfth Night, but it looks exactly like a scene in Twelfth Night when Sir Andrew Aguchiga, if my memory serves me right, touches Maria's breast, and Festi, the one in the middle called the Procuress, is there, and then you have Sir Toby. I mean, it looks very much like an illustration of the scene. It's not one, and yet it works. And it's an excellent illustration of the scene, which it is not. And I think this is great. So sometimes it's not an illustration, but it's a perfect illustration.
Yes.
Yeah.
So many more pictures to look at. And,
Oh yeah, so many.
It's interesting that this is a good case when illustration makes a connection with the text, obviously, but also links to other pictures, like the whole history of painting, maybe. And the illustration is not only connected to the text; it's also connected to other pictures. Like genre paintings, portraits, scenes, etc. And therefore, it makes a connection between the text and these other pictures, which have apparently nothing to do with it originally, but the illustration is there connecting them. What you just said is there.
It's organic.
A good example of that. Yes.
Yeah, it's organic. There's a life in illustration, a life of its own. I mean, it's a growing world.
So where will you be going from that? Is it still an ongoing project? For you, Michael, do you think there are more Victorian illustrations to be found?
So I think, as in regards to the Shakespeare archive, I think I can now say that's done. I'm happy with what it represents and the comprehensiveness of it. But doing some research for this talk to get me up to speed again, because it's been a couple of years since I properly thought this in depth about it. Really quite inspired to go back and maybe get some articles out about some of these concepts we've been discussing, because it's been really interesting. I think there's always stuff there, even if it isn't about Shakespeare. The world of illustration, word and image, that interaction, what's going on there, the function, it's absolutely endless, and it's still a subject I feel like we haven't really scratched the surface of. I don't know what the two of you feel about that, but I certainly feel like this, and I've been doing it for 10 years now or so. So I don't think we've become any more, I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the conversation will continue then. That's good.
Oh, yeah.
But there's still
Yeah.
For decades.
any new or ongoing
Yeah.
projects after Picturing Shakespeare?
I'm working on the second volume of Picturing Shakespeare. By the way, it's a play on words. Picturing is picture in Shakespeare. I tried to illustrate, to get an equivalent for illustre Shakespeare in French, which was the play words. And so I'm working on the second volume, and my illustrations have changed because now there are more and more settings, backgrounds to them. And there was a period when I represented scenes. Maybe I could show you. It was published by Ellipse. This is a representation of Act 1, Scene 1 of Twelfth Night. So you have,
Oh wow, yeah.
listening to music.
Yes.
Oh wow.
So you've got a setting now, and Violet coming out of
That's so different, Jean-Louis.
Yeah, it's very different. I'm trying new things.
Yeah.
One of the projects.
That's wonderful.
And the latest one,
Yeah.
I've made a sort of copy of a Rembrandt painting with pencil colors, big one. So I try plenty of things, trying my hand. Oil painting with colored pencils.
Well, excellent. Well, looking forward to a second conversation on.
With a great pleasure.
Well, thank you very much to you both.
Thank you very much.
Just to finish, maybe I can show our viewers the links to Michael's various websites. You've got these two and even more because, as you said, you've been working on even more other projects, but you can find all the links there. And the website of the Anthem Press, where you can find the details. You can order Jean-Louis' book, Picturing Shakespeare. Thank you very much to you both, and well, have a nice rest of the day, and to our viewers, see you
very much
next time for our next conversation.
Thank you, Maxime.
With great pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, wonderful.